Raina Langford had made 1,000 fast reads in 1,000 rooms, and she had been right almost every single time. Until the Tuesday night she pointed at the man in the gray uniform and said the two words she would spend the rest of her life wishing she could take back. Easy money. She had no idea that the man she'd just called that was the same man who had quietly built the foundation her entire company was standing on. But to understand what made those two words so costly, we have to go back to the beginning of that Tuesday evening, to a man named Wesley Harlan, $43 in his bank account, a 9-year-old son doing homework in a chair by the wall, and a vehicle inspection he thought would be the most ordinary thing he did all week. My name is Wesley Harlan, 34 years old, lead fleet maintenance technician for a logistics company out of Chicago, Illinois. Single father, and, on most Tuesday nights, the man with $43 in his checking account, and a son who has never once complained about it. I wake up at 4:47 every morning, not because of an alarm. My body stopped needing one a long time ago. Back when sleeping past 5 meant someone didn't make it home. The 4:47 remains, loyal as an old scar. I make breakfast before the sun comes up. Eggs and toast on good weeks, oatmeal when the budget reminds me that payday is still 4 days out. My son Theo, 9 years old, wireframe glasses, cartoon backpack, 42 pounds of quiet and curiosity. He eats whatever I put in front of him without complaint. He has never once asked me why we don't go to the places his classmates talk about. He just tells me about whatever he was reading before bed. We live in a 2-bedroom apartment in Logan Square, on Chicago's northwest side. The kind of building where the radiator knocks all winter, and the landlord's sense of urgency runs on its own private calendar. I learned early to fix things myself. I pack his lunch the night before, turkey on wheat, an apple, a small bag of cheddar crackers he likes, and I write something on the napkin every time. A bad joke, a space fact, sometimes just 2 words. You're good. He told me once, very casually, like it was nothing, that he keeps them in a box under his bed. I haven't asked to see it. Some things belong exactly where they are. I drive a 2009 Dodge Grand Caravan with 214,000 miles on the odometer, and a check engine light I've learned to read like a second language. Theo calls it the old dragon. I call it paid off. 6'2", broad through the shoulders, a face people describe as hard to read, which I think just means calm. There is a small crescent scar on my left jaw, the kind of story I don't tell at school pickup lines. My eyes are a steel blue that people occasionally call cold. They're not cold, they're just steady. I used to be someone else. Someone the United States Navy spent a considerable amount of time and deliberate discomfort building into a very specific kind of instrument. That part of my life ended when my wife Sarah got sick. I came home. I was there when she left. And I became the only thing that mattered more than any title the Navy ever gave me. Theo's dad. Full-time. No backup. No relief shift. I don't talk about the before. Not at work, not at the PTA meetings I show up to in my gray technician uniform. I've felt the eyes at those meetings. A specific kind of invisible. Seen and dismissed in the same half-second. After Theo went to bed, after the dishes were done and the lunch was packed, I would sit at the kitchen counter with my phone and work. Fleet advisory reports, routing analyses, efficiency proposals for hospital-adjacent delivery runs. Dry work. The kind nobody asks for, and nobody acknowledges. I filed them because the data was clear and the gaps were real. I sent the reports upward and heard nothing back. That was fine. You do the right thing because it's the right thing. The most recent one, 7 months ago, 40 pages. A full restructure proposal for hospital-run routing during construction windows. I had no idea that work would walk back into my life in the most unexpected way imaginable. The night everything changed. I was at the Grand Ballroom at Navy Pier, routine vehicle inspection. 3 fleet units staged along the east entrance. Theo was with me, not unusual. He had a standing bag packed for exactly this: a library book, a water bottle, and the particular patience of a kid who had learned that his father's hours weren't always predictable. He found a chair near the back wall, set his backpack down, and opened his book without being told anything. I had $43 in my bank account, a son doing his homework 12 feet away, and a vehicle inspection to finish. That was the whole shape of my Tuesday. Right up until it wasn't. Stay right here, because what happened when a microphone found Wesley Harlan across a room full of people who had already decided what he was worth is exactly where this story truly begins. Her name was Raina Langford, 33 years old, CEO of Langford Logistics Solutions, the same company that contracted the fleet my team maintained, which placed her, technically, 3 org chart levels above the people who signed my timesheets. She walked into rooms the way certain people do, not loudly, but with the kind of settled certainty that rearranges the air around it without asking permission. Dark hair pulled into a high, clean ponytail, sharp green eyes that moved across a crowd, looking for something without entirely knowing what. She was hosting the charity segment of the evening, CEO Challenge for Charity, a judo demonstration. She'd take on a volunteer from the audience, raise money for children's health care, and show the room what a third Dan black belt looked like when the person holding it had something to prove. The MC had made sure everyone knew about the belt. Twice. I was not paying close attention. I was watching the time on my phone, running the math on whether we could be out the door in 20 minutes. Then her voice cut clean through the noise of the room. "The big guy in the back corner, gray uniform. Yeah, you." I looked up. Every head in that ballroom turned in the same direction I did. "We had a volunteer cancel on us tonight, and you look like a man who can hold his ground. Easy money for charity. What do you say?" Laughter moved through the crowd. Warm. Social. The kind of laughter that says, "We're all in on this together." I was the only one who hadn't been asked if I wanted to be. I would learn later what had actually happened in the 30 minutes before she pointed at me. The registered volunteer had pulled out that afternoon. Knee problem. The event team needed a replacement, and one of Raina's associates. A man in a gray suit near the front table had pointed in my direction and said, casually, "What about the maintenance guy in the back? Seems like a fair test of the point." That was how her eyes found me. She saw a man in a gray uniform standing at the edge of a room that wasn't his. She saw a category. Someone who wouldn't push back, someone who would be flattered by the attention, or too polite to decline it publicly. She wasn't trying to humiliate anyone. She was executing a play that seemed obvious from the information she'd actually bothered to collect. That is what unchecked assumption looks like from the inside. It doesn't feel like prejudice. It feels like reading a room. The problem was that her read was built entirely on what I was wearing, not on a single thing I'd said, not on a single thing I'd done. She was wrong. She did not know she was wrong. I set my phone in my jacket pocket. Theo's hand found my forearm, small, quiet, just resting there. I was already in the process of deciding to decline, politely, without drama. I had no interest in being anyone's entertainment. He had a science test Thursday. We'd been quizzing each other on the water cycle all week while I made dinner. Then her voice came again, quieter now, and sharper for it. "Or maybe you'd rather not, that's okay. Some men don't love the idea of a woman taking them down in front of a crowd, especially in front of their kid." The room went half quiet. I looked down at Theo. His jaw was set, the way it gets when something has landed and he has decided. Quietly, not to show it. His glasses had slid slightly down his nose. He didn't push them up. He was watching me the way a compass needle watches north, completely still and completely committed. And this is where Wesley Harlan made a decision that had almost nothing to do with pride. There is a different kind of decision that lives one level beneath ego. It has nothing to do with the room. It has everything to do with the child standing next to you, and what he is quietly learning right now about what a man does when someone tries to use his silence against him. If he walked away, the lesson was clear. Staying quiet is always the safer choice, even when it costs you something real. Wesley Harlan had no intention of teaching his son that. He had built his entire post-Navy life around restraint. But there is a line between choosing peace and absorbing a public dismissal in front of your child while pretending it doesn't exist. Wesley knew where that line was. Raina had just stepped over it. Not with malice, with the casual confidence of someone who had never needed to consider whether a line was there. I put my cup down on the tray of a passing server, straightened to my full height, and walked toward the mat without saying a word. The crowd shifted as I moved through it. From the edge, I heard Jamie, a younger technician from my shift. He said one word under his breath to whoever was standing next to him. Wouldn't. Just that, no explanation. He just watched the mat. I stepped onto it. Raina looked at me, actually looked, maybe for the first time. Something recalibrated behind those green eyes. I was larger up close than I'd read from the stage. She recovered fast. I gave her credit for that. Okay, she said, handing the microphone off. Let's make this interesting. She came immediately. No warm-up, no formality, fast, clean, technically precise. She wasn't performing skill she hadn't earned. I stepped, I redirected, used exactly as much energy as the moment required, and not 1 ounce more. She came again, harder this time, adjusting, reading me, searching for an angle. She was smart. That came through in everything she did. But underneath the technique, she was also frustrated. And frustration has a way of making smart people reach for their strongest move before the moment actually calls for it. I sprawled cleanly, took her momentum wide. The crowd that had been laughing began to change. People started exchanging glances, the kind that happen when a room's assumptions begin to come loose at the edges. I said nothing. I kept my feet, I kept my breathing level, and I waited. Raina publicly called out a stranger in front of his 9-year-old son to entertain a room full of people, and called it charity. Was Wesley wrong to step onto that mat? Or was walking away the one thing a father in that situation should never do? Drop your answer in the comments right now. There is a moment in any real physical confrontation where technique stops being the deciding factor. It becomes about something quieter. Which person can remain most completely themselves inside the pressure? And which person needs the outcome more than they need their composure? Raina Langford reached that moment about 4 minutes in. I could see it before she likely felt it, in the way her shoulders set a fraction tighter than clean form required, in the slight forward lean of someone reaching for resolution rather than waiting for it. She was used to winning. Not carelessly. She had earned her belt, put in real years on real mats. But she had also spent a decade in rooms where her authority was the fixed point that everything else rotated around. And right now, in front of every person whose professional opinion shaped the walls of her world, a man in a gray maintenance uniform was calmly, quietly, refusing to go down. She switched grips, set up the entry for a hip throw. Clean, committed, ground transition ready behind it, effective against someone who reacts. I didn't react. I let her take me to the ground. He could have ended the match earlier. Any trained observer could identify at least 3 moments where Wesley had positioning that would have finished things cleanly and publicly. He didn't take any of them. Because Wesley Harlan had spent 3 years committed to one thing: restraint. Not weakness, not fear, restraint. The daily choice not to be the person he used to be. Because Theo needed a father more than the world needed another demonstration of what Wesley was capable of. But restraint has a threshold. What Raina had done with that microphone, using Theo as the lever, had moved Wesley's threshold closer than she could have known. He chose the ground, the position from which he could end this without taking anything from her she could not recover from. Not wounded ego, the calculation of a man who knew the precise difference between what he was capable of and what the moment deserved. She went for the ground transition. I shifted my hip angle, 2 inches, no more, crossed my leg, and locked her shoulder and torso into a position where any pressure she generated would immediately redirect against her own. The geometry was invisible to the room, but it was absolute. I didn't squeeze. I didn't force anything. I simply held. And I looked up at her face. For the first time since she had picked up that microphone, Raina Langford looked uncertain. Not humiliated, not frightened. Uncertain. The calculation in her green eyes had flickered. She could feel the position without fully understanding how she'd arrived in it. I said, quietly enough that only she could hear, "We can stop here." Not, "I win." Not, "tap out." Just, "We can stop here." An offer, a door, a way out that cost her nothing in front of the people whose opinions formed the walls of her professional world. She went completely still. I released the hold, pushed up from the mat, and stood. Then I extended my hand down to her. She looked at it for 1 full second. The ballroom was quiet enough that I could hear the ventilation system running somewhere above the chandeliers. She took my hand. I pulled her to her feet, stepped back, gave her the space she needed to stand on her own. No look to the crowd, no moment held for effect. I simply stepped back. The applause that followed was the uncertain kind. Genuine, but unsure of its own direction. The room didn't quite know what it had just watched, or who to give the moment to. That was fine by me. What was not fine, what I had not anticipated, happened in the next 30 seconds. The movement of stepping back pulled my left sleeve up slightly, just past the wrist, a few inches of forearm in the warm light of the ballroom. The tattoo wasn't large, dark blue ink, worn at the edges from years of weather and work. A trident, the symbol the Navy awards after a process most people who begin it do not complete. Raina's eyes found it before I'd registered the sleeve was up. Something shifted in her expression that I had not expected. Not awe, not guilt, something more specific. The look of someone who had seen that symbol before, in a different context, on a different person. Someone who had learned what it meant not from a documentary, but from a kitchen table conversation, or a face that came home looking different than the one that left. She looked from the tattoo to my face. I had already pulled my sleeve back down. "I'm sorry," she said. 2 words, no microphone, no audience, said to me, only to me, direct and unadorned and real. I nodded once. I was about to step off the mat and go collect my son, but life, in its particular stubborn way, had no interest in letting us close any doors tonight, because across the marble floor a voice was cutting above the crowd, sharp, urgent, distinctly wrong for the occasion, and I caught a word I knew. Lurie. Lurie Children's Hospital, North Michigan Avenue, 6 minutes from where we were standing. And whatever was happening around that word was not going well. The next 4 minutes would save lives. Wesley Harlan would never know the names of, and surface the one thing he had worked hardest to keep buried. Ashley, the event coordinator I'd seen at the vehicle check-in earlier, was moving fast across the marble floor toward the service corridor, tablet against her chest, talking into her earpiece with the clipped efficiency of someone managing a situation that had just moved outside normal parameters. I caught the words lurry and transport and tracking before the ambient noise swallowed the rest. I stepped off the mat and moved in her direction. The picture came together in under a minute. A transport vehicle was sitting stationary on North Columbus Drive, just south of the Illinois Street construction backup, a bottleneck I had rerouted around 14 times in the past year. The driver's GPS showed solid red in every direction. He had no approved alternate, no authority to deviate from his mapped route without clearance from fleet management. He had been sitting there for 11 minutes. I gave Ashley the route immediately. Tell him Lakeshore Drive northbound, cut west on East Grand Avenue, then approach from the Superior Street entrance to Lurie. Clear lanes the entire way, 4 minutes. She typed it, relayed it through her earpiece. A pause. Then she looked at me. Driver says he can't accept a reroute from event staff. He needs fleet authority, or he stays put until dispatch clears it. I stood still for 3 seconds. I thought about what was in that vehicle, and what 4 minutes meant when you understood the stakes. Then I looked at Jeremiah Cole. He was already standing at the edge of the corridor. The same man I had noticed on his perimeter walk when I arrived. The one with the military tattoo at his collar, and the walk that said the room belonged to him. He had seen the tattoo when my sleeve pulled back. He had done the math. He was already holding a radio out to me. He said nothing. He didn't need to. I took the radio. My voice changed when I keyed it. Not dramatically, not for the room. It just went to a register I had not used in 3 years. Level, clear, and completely certain of itself. Driver, this is Wesley Harlan, Fleet Maintenance. Switch to manual navigation. From your current position, Columbus northbound is blocked. Take East Lake Shore northbound. Cut west on East Grand Avenue. Approach Lurie from the Superior Street entrance. Clear lanes the entire route. Estimated arrival 4 minutes. Confirm when rolling. A beat. Copy. Rolling now. I lowered the radio. Ashley looked at me, then at the radio, then back at me. Thank you, she said. Simply. No follow-up. Some people are good at recognizing when a door is politely closed. I was grateful she was one of them. I handed the radio back to Jeremiah Cole. He took it, extended his hand. I won't say anything, he said, unless you want me to. I don't, I said. Understood. We shook hands. That was the entire conversation. Some things don't need more than they need. I turned around. 4 minutes and 11 seconds later, the driver confirmed arrival at Lurie Children's Hospital, North Michigan Avenue entrance. I was already walking back across the room. Here is the thing about the promise Wesley made at the kitchen table 2 years ago. He had meant every word of it. Leaving the Navy had cost him his identity, the only competence he had ever been formally recognized for. What remained was a man who fixed vehicles and packed lunches and sat on a creaking porch swing and filed reports that nobody read. That was the trade he had made, willingly, for Theo. So when he picked up that radio, when his voice went to that register it hadn't visited in 3 years, it was not a small thing. It was the very specific act of a man who had built his entire post-military life around not being called back to who he was, choosing to be called back anyway. Not because he wanted to, because the alternative was sitting still while the math was clear and the stakes were real. And the only thing standing between a need and the person who could meet it was a promise he'd made to protect his son from a version of himself his son was never supposed to see again. He made the call. He would explain it to Theo afterward. And he would mean that explanation the same way he had meant the original promise. Theo was in his chair, exactly where I had left him. Not in the middle of the room, not running toward me, just sitting, backpack in his lap, book closed, glasses on, looking at his shoes. I sat down beside him, The room was still buzzing behind us. Whatever had just happened with the transport was moving through the event staff in quiet, urgent clusters. Theo said nothing for a moment. Neither did I. Then, still looking at his shoes, "You promised, Dad, after Mom. You said we were just going to be normal." His voice was quiet, controlled, which told me, better than anything else could have, how much it was costing him to say it that way. I didn't answer immediately. I sat with it, let the weight of it be what it was before I tried to speak to it. "I know what I promised," I said. And I meant it. But there were people who needed something to reach them tonight. I didn't go back to who I was before. I used the roads I know, that's all. "Can you tell the difference?" He looked up at me then, those careful eyes, going all the way to the bottom of whatever I was saying, the way he always does when something matters. A long moment. "Yeah," he said quietly. "I can tell." He leaned his shoulder into my arm, barely any weight to it, all the weight in the world, across the room. Raina Langford stood near the stage with a tablet in her hand. She wasn't looking at the tablet. She was looking at us, at a 9-year-old boy with a cartoon backpack leaning into his father's arm in a gray maintenance uniform. I didn't meet her eyes. "You want to get out of here?" I said. "Yes, please," Theo said. Quiet. "Sure." We stood up together, walked toward the exit. No drama, no announcement. The room made the ordinary, unremarkable space that rooms make for people who are clearly finished with them. We were almost to the door when something happened that Wesley wouldn't learn about until days later. Something quiet. Documentary. Nothing dramatic at all. That would turn out to matter more than anything that had happened on the mat. The drive home took 22 minutes. Theo fell asleep somewhere around Fullerton Avenue. Head tipped against the cold window of the old Dragon, glasses still on his face. Backpack hugged to his chest the way he holds things he has decided matter. I drove carefully, not because the roads were bad, because those 22 minutes, just him and me and the amber wash of streetlights on rain-damp Chicago asphalt, were among the most honest parts of any week. Logan Square was quiet when we got home. I carried Theo up 2 flights. He's getting heavy now, almost too heavy for this, which means he's growing, which means time is doing what it always does. Whether you're ready for it or not. I got him into bed without fully waking him, took his glasses off, set them on the nightstand beside the library book. The page on Titan dog-eared. I smoothed the blanket, stood in the doorway, just for a minute. When the house is quiet and the kid is safe and you have made it through one more day, the gratitude and the grief and the plain bone tiredness all arrive at the same time, all in the same place. You don't know whether to sit down or keep standing, so you just lean against the frame and breathe until it passes. I stayed until his breathing went all the way down into sleep. Then I went to the kitchen. Instant coffee. The good stuff was gone until Friday. I opened the fleet maintenance log on my phone out of pure habit, then the advisory submissions folder. 7 months of reports, filed upward. Heard nothing. I thought about the driver sitting for 11 minutes in a bottleneck I had mapped a solution for 7 months ago. About the 40 pages sitting in a procurement inbox until someone had reason to go looking. But you do the right thing because it's the right thing, and what someone else does with it has always been outside your control. I closed the folder. Full salary, she'd said. Benefits. Corporate level. I thought about the $43 that had been in my checking account on Tuesday night. I thought about the box under Theo's bed where he keeps the napkin notes. I don't know how long I stood there. Long enough that the coffee went lukewarm. Then I turned off the kitchen light and went to bed. What I did not know, and would not learn until Raina told me herself, was what happened in the grand ballroom after Theo and I walked out. She had not stayed for the end of the event. She had gone back to her table and asked, quietly, without explanation, for every piece of documentation connected to the fleet maintenance contract. All of it, that night. Her coordinator worked for 2 hours. What she eventually found was a report filed through a blanket contractor advisory channel 7 months prior. 40 pages. A restructured routing protocol for hospital-adjacent fleet runs during Tuesday and Thursday construction windows. No name on the submission form, when the logistics team had implemented that protocol. Delivery delays for hospital runs had dropped by 31% in a single quarter. Those numbers had secured a major contract renewal with the hospital system 2 months before that evening. She had walked into that renewal meeting with those numbers. She had presented them as evidence that her team executed at a high level. But the architecture those numbers were built on had been written by someone she'd pointed at from a stage and called easy money. The floor she had been standing on had been built in someone else's kitchen, after someone else's child went to sleep, by someone who expected nothing back. Because expecting nothing back was simply the shape of the work. That is the kind of reckoning that doesn't arrive loudly, the kind that finds you in private, without an audience. I didn't know any of it was happening. I was asleep by 10:30. Thursday morning, kitchen counter. Zipping Theo's backpack before the school run. He looked up at me, head tilted slightly, the way he does before he asks something real. "Dad, are you glad you went up there? To the mat?" "I'm sorry it got pushed that far," I said, "but I'm not sorry I stood up." He nodded slowly, working through it. "Because of me?" he said. "Because of both of us. You needed to see it, and I needed to do it. Both things were true at the same time." He picked up the backpack, pushed his glasses up with 2 fingers, moved toward the door, then stopped, hand on the doorframe. "I think Mom would have thought it was cool." He was down the hallway before I could find words. Which was fine. There are things Theo says that land below language, in a place language can't follow. They don't need a response. They just need to be heard. I stood at the door for a moment after he left, then picked up my keys and went after him. She came on a Saturday morning. I was crouched in front of the old Dragon's left front wheel well with a socket wrench, working on a bearing that had been making its feelings known for 2 weeks. When a car I didn't recognize pulled to the curb on Diversey Avenue. Dark gray sedan, quiet engine, nothing flashy. The kind of vehicle that says money without needing to announce it. Raina Langford stepped out alone. No power suit today. Dark jeans, a simple jacket. Hair down for the first time I'd seen it. More like a person and less like a presentation. She stood on the sidewalk, looked at me. At Theo on the stoop doing his reading homework. At the van. Back at me. "You're hard to find," she said. "I'm in the phone book," I said. I kept the wrench moving. "Nobody's in the phone book." "I am." She almost smiled, walked forward and stopped a few feet back from the wheel well. "I wanted to apologize," she said, "in person, without a microphone." "You already apologized," I said. "That was shock," she said. "This is considered." I set the wrench down, stood up, wiped my hands on the shop rag and looked at her. "All right," I said. "I'm listening." Coming here required more from Raina Langford than most people would give her credit for. She had spent her career building an identity on reading situations clearly, assessing people accurately, not making the kind of error that required her to drive to someone else's neighborhood on a Saturday morning and stand on a sidewalk hoping the door would open. The 2 words in the ballroom had been real, but they'd been delivered in the adrenaline of a moment, with an audience still present. This was the harder version, the one you make after you've gone home and slept badly, and found the report, and sat alone with what that meant. She didn't make a speech. I think she'd prepared one on the drive over, and discarded it somewhere around Fullerton Avenue. What came instead was direct and imperfect and honest. I chose you on Tuesday night because you looked like the safest option in the room, the person least likely to push back. I didn't see you. I saw what you were wearing and where you were standing. And then I used your son as a reason for you to say yes. That was wrong. As a person. She paused. But that's not the part that kept me up all week. I've been running a company on a system I didn't build. The 31% reduction I walked into that contract renewal meeting with came from 40 pages written by someone I pointed at from a stage and called easy money. I took credit for work I didn't do. Not intentionally, but not paying close enough attention is its own kind of taking. The street was quiet between us. I looked at the wheel well, then at her. Most of the people who keep things running don't expect a letter, I said. That's not cynicism. It's just how the work works. It shouldn't work that way, she said. No, I said, it shouldn't. Something settled in her face at that. Not relief exactly, more like the specific stillness of a person who has been carrying a thing and has finally found somewhere honest to set it down. She took a breath. There's a fleet advisory position open at the corporate level. 3 weeks now. Full salary, full benefits. You are the most qualified candidate I have. I looked at the stoop. Theo had lowered his book by approximately 3 inches, staring at the middle distance with the precise expression of someone who is absolutely not listening. I looked back at Raina. I thought about the $43. I thought about the napkin notes. I thought about the porch swing and its faithful, unresolvable creak. I'll think about it, I said. That's all I'm asking, she said. She left about 20 minutes later. Before she opened the car door, she stopped and looked up at Theo on the stoop. Hey, what are you reading? Theo held the cover up without fully moving. Saturn, he said. It has 83 moons. Most of them don't have names yet. Something in her expression went quiet in a way that had nothing to do with anything professional. Most of the best things don't get named right away, she said. Theo considered this the way he considers everything that might actually matter. Thoroughly, without rushing. That's true, he said, and went back to his page. I watched the sedan turn off Diversey. Then I crouched back down and picked up the socket wrench. The bearing still needed tending. Payday was Friday. Somewhere upstairs. The porch swing waited, with its faithful creak on the left side. Life was exactly what it had always been. Only now, one more person in the world had stood on this sidewalk and looked at it close enough to see what it actually was. Not a category, not a type, not easy money for anyone's stage. Just a man, and his son, and everything they were building together, quietly, without ceremony, on a street that the rest of the world mostly drove past without slowing down. And that, without applause, without an audience, felt like exactly enough. Here is what this story is actually about. Not the judo mat, not the tattoo, not the promotion. It is about a man who filed 40 pages into a system that never said thank you, and filed them anyway. Because the work was right, not because someone was watching. Most of us spend our lives waiting to be seen before we give our best. Wesley never waited. He packed the lunch, wrote the napkin note, sent the report, fixed the bearing, showed up in the gray uniform when the room expected him to disappear. That is the real discipline. Not the dramatic moment. The Tuesday. The 4:47 a.m., the oatmeal week. If you are raising a child right now, in a world that looks through you more than it looks at you, know this. They are not watching for the big moment. They are watching how you carry the small one. That is the only lesson that lasts. Written by a human with AI as companion, it hopes to leave you with a warm feeling that even when wrongly treated or looked down upon, there are still people and good things quietly standing on your side.